Semiconductors used in solar panels. The reason why you use semiconductors in solar panels, the really important thing about a semiconductor is you have a thing called a band gap. And what's the best way to explain a band gap? I explain band gaps to my students at university to be a little bit like a glass of Coke, right? You can imagine that what you can do is you've got a vessel, which is just your chunk of material, and you can pour electrons into it, and they will fill from the bottom all the way up, right? And you can imagine a metal, for example, is a substance which has, you can fill all the way up and there's no gaps in the middle. You can imagine a semiconductor is a little bit like a magical glass where you can fill up to a certain level and then there's something in there where that liquid can't sit, so it has to go up to the next bit higher, okay? Imagine it's like a little platform in there. And so what happens is that if you want to put more electrons into there, they have to go up to a higher energy. And the way a solar cell works is that light comes in and it pushes one of these electrons up into this higher level, and then you can take that energy elsewhere and turn that into electrical current or something like that. And that's why we use semiconductors and not, for example, metals. In metals it can fill all the way up, and there's no way to make this thing jump up to somewhere higher. It will just jump up a little bit higher. In simplest terms, it's a bit more technical than that.
Another question, girls? Anyone else got another question?
What is mechatronic engineering, and is it similar to this topic?
Mechatronic engineering it's kind of similar a little bit. Mechatronic engineering is where you build robots, essentially. So what you do is you try to have mechanical devices that are driven by electronics, and you do engineering with them. You solve problems. So a lot of mechatronics is taking sort of ways of automating things and using electronics to drive that automation. It's robotics, basically. Fancy name for it.
Another question? Fine.
Yeah, I was just wondering, with solar technology, how far do you think technology can advance that industry?
I think solar's got quite a lot of potential. A really interesting calculation that I make a lot of my undergraduate students do is to sit down and work out how much, you can just do an estimate of how much energy the Earth needs, and you can work out how much land area you need if you had a good solar system to extract that energy. And you don't need that much land. There's so much energy coming in from the sun that if you work out a way to extract it efficiently, you don't even need coal and stuff anymore. You need to overcome one problem, which is that you need to be able to store the energy, because the sun only shines for 8 or 9 hours of the day, and people are working on solving that now. Everything from batteries right through to inventive ideas like using the energy to pump water uphill, and then at night you let the water run back downhill and you collect the energy back again. But I think solar's got a long way to go. People sort of talk about it as a mature technology now, and it is. I mean, it's turning up on roofs and in buildings and all these sorts of things, but I think 20 years from now solar's going to be quite a bit different to how it is now. It's going to advance a long way. Nanotechnology has a lot to offer to that as well. There's a lot of groups at the moment who are working on not just having solar cells the way we normally do them, but using nanotechnology ideas, things like quantum dots and quantum wires and stuff like that, to improve the efficiency of solar cells, but also to improve their cost. So at the moment you have to take a great big chunk of silicon to make your solar cell. And in future it may be easy enough to just make a paint that you paint on the roof of your house, and you have, a solar cell paint and all these sorts of things. These are all the ideas that are being worked on at the moment.
Another question, guys?
Adam.
Yeah.
First of all here. Is nanotechnology only for electronic type devices, or are we talking machines here as well?
Well, nanotechnology is popping up everywhere at the moment.
Sunscreen.
Sunscreens, it turns up in biology at the moment, so new ways of making medicines that target things in the body. There's even these sorts of ideas of having, you know, nanorobots that flow around the body and find things that they want to find. People are looking at it for waste management, for example. So one of my favourite problems to think about is not so much clean energy, but also clean waste management. I mean, we take so much stuff these days, we just chuck it in garbage tips, and eventually we're going to run out of resources and we're going to have all this junk that's piled up around the place. People are looking at ways of using nanotechnology to deal with that waste management, convert it back into the raw materials that we need to bring in the front of manufacturing cycles. Let me think, there's all sorts of things. Electronics is just the beginning.
Just on that issue, next week, or the week after actually, on the 23rd, we'll also be having another video conference where part of that day's video conference series will actually involve some more talks about different aspects of nanotechnology. So if you're particularly interested in nanotechnology, it is a growth area. It's got support from the federal government through Department of Innovation. So we can start to imagine that the federal government sees it as a potential future growth area for employment for this country in terms of its high-tech future. So I think it's fair to say that it's something that could possibly lead to quite a significant number of you people, if you're interested in pursuing physics and aspects of the sciences, could end up actually employed in that way, or perhaps if you're not so interested in science, perhaps in looking after and selling aspects of nanotechnology. I think its potential is limitless. I think that's the way that we should describe it. And Adam has already talked about 50 years as a time horizon. Science is not something which happens instantly.
Not always. Sometimes it happens quite instantly.
Yeah.
But basic research can sometimes have a long lead time, but the spin-offs that end up benefiting you and society can be immense. Imagine, you saw that first transistor, the guys who invented that first transistor back in the 1950s. Now imagine what they would think 60 years later when you can get literally now millions of transistors on a single chip.
Well, and also to look at the share price of the company they were working for when they developed it.